As we look back at the table of our 4 tissue types that we started this chapter with, you see we've already covered the epithelials and the connectives. We'll do a very, very brief look at muscle and nervous tissue again, because we're going to cover these in great detail when we get to those chapters that focus on that organ system and the tissues that make it up. Muscle tissue contracts, which means the cells shorten when they're stimulated. Now we're going to get more of that later. Contraction of muscle causes movement. We have 3 types of muscle. Skeletal muscle is attached to bone. When it contracts, it moves your body parts. For instance, if you move your arm, that's because skeletal muscle attached to the bones in your arm. When those muscles contract, your arm moves. Contraction of the heart is carried out by cardiac muscle. So what does it move? It moves blood through and out of the heart. And then we have smooth muscle, which contracts and moves things through hollow organs, such as once you swallow your food. Smooth muscle contraction moves those food products through your digestive tract. Your blood vessels can contract and relax to move blood to a different part of the body in greater volume, or to restrict blood flow, or to increase or decrease blood pressure. So we'll do a very quick look at each of these 3 types of muscle tissue. So as mentioned in our overview, skeletal muscle is attached to bone. When those muscles contract, it moves the skeleton, which moves your body. Skeletal muscle fibers are very long cylindrical shaped cells that are arranged in parallel bundles that run the entire length of a muscle. They are multinucleated, which means they have more than one nucleus. They are striated in appearance. As you can see, they look like they're striped. So each one of these long purple things is a muscle cell, also called a muscle fiber. So these are very large cells. Now, these cells these muscles are what we call voluntary muscle, because you can move them voluntarily. They're stimulated by something called the somatic nervous system. Somatic refers to of the body. So again, skeletal muscle, voluntary muscle contraction, moving your body, because these muscles are attached to bone. Your cardiac muscle is found in the myocardium. Myo refers to muscle. Cardi, of course, means heart. So this is the middle layer of the heart wall. When your heart muscle contracts, it pushes blood through the heart and out of the heart so that it's distributed out throughout your body. There are also striations. If you look closely, you can see them there. The cells are a bit shorter and they branch. Now, they're connected by something called intercalated disc. If you look, you can see these dark lines that run perpendicular to the way the cells are running. So your cells are running horizontally. Your intercalated disc are these little dark vertical lines. Those are made up of desmosomes and gap junctions. Think back to what you have already learned about cell structure and function when you learned about the junctions between cells. Desmosomes form spot welds. Now remember, that keeps these cells from pulling apart, because from the time your heart is formed in your mother's uterus until the day you die, these cells are contracting an average of 75 times a minute as a unit. So all of these cells contracting are under great force. Those desmosomes anchor them or spot weld them together. Gap junctions are also a part of these intercalated discs, and their role is to allow ions to move from cell to cell, so that all of your cardiac muscle cells are going to contract simultaneously due to the depolarization. Ooh, there's a big word. We'll come to that one soon. Depolarization of those muscle cells by the ions moving allows those muscle cells to contract. Now, these are involuntary muscle tissues. You cannot make them contract or make them not contract. But we have these patches of cells in the heart that make up what we call the cardiac conduction system because they're autorhythmic. They make themselves contract, so they don't rely on the nervous system. However, the autonomic nervous system, which controls your fight or flight response and many other things, can change your heart rate. I mean, think about it. If you have an adrenaline rush, that's because your autonomic nervous system thinks, oh, fight or flight, I've got to do something. What happens to your heart rate? Instead of that, you have, right? So contraction has been altered, but it doesn't stop or start because of the nervous system. And our third and final type of muscle is smooth muscle. So smooth muscle makes up sheets of cells. The cells are somewhat spindle-shaped, meaning they're fatter in the middle and sort of pointy on the end. They are not striated. They're uninucleate, which means they only have one nucleus. We find smooth muscle in the walls of hollow organs, so that when these sheets of muscle contract, it moves the contents within those organs, such as moving food and waste products through your intestine, moving food products out of your stomach into your intestine, bronchoconstriction, making your airways smaller and then relaxing again to make them larger. Your urinary bladder has smooth muscle, so that muscle contracts to help push the urine out and so that you know you need to urinate. Your uterus is made of smooth muscle. We contract it to push a baby out during labor, but also to help dislodge the endometrium during the monthly menses and lining the walls of your blood vessels. So when those muscles that line your blood vessels constrict, it makes your blood vessels smaller. That limits the blood flow to the areas that blood vessel serves, but it also increases the pressure, so it's a temporary quick fix for blood pressure. The action that moves things along these passageways is called peristalsis. So it is alternating rhythmic contractions of the smooth muscle that is arranged in circular layers as well as longitudinal layers that go along a passageway. So peristalsis is that rhythmic muscle contraction that propels things along that passageway. Again, smooth muscle is involuntary. We do not control its contraction. There are pacemaker cells that initiate contraction, and a lot of times those are stimulated simply by stretching the walls of the container that's lined by smooth muscle. The contraction can be regulated by the autonomic nervous system as well. And since we only have one slide on nervous tissue, again, you're going to get several chapters on this later in the semester. We're just going to throw this in here with muscle rather than doing a whole video on one slide. So nervous tissue is our fourth category. It's located in the brain, the spinal cord, and the nerves that run to and from the brain and spinal cord and the body. We have two types of cells. Glial cells that are supporting cells. They do not fire nerve impulses. They protect, nourish, and support the neurons. The neurons are the star of the show. They receive, transmit, and process electrical signals by firing nerve impulses. When we look at the parts of the cells that make up nervous tissue, we have the cell body, that is your processor, and then we have two different types of processes that stick off the cell body. You have very highly branched and numerous dendrites. Think of those as your receivers. They receive information. Then your cell body processes that and fires a nerve impulse when it is appropriate to do so down this extension of the cell, which is an axon. So a nerve impulse will fire electrical activity down this axon, and then something happens to the cells that are on the other end of this. If it's a muscle cell, that muscle's going to contract. If it's another nerve cell, wow, we don't know yet. There's a lot of things that could cause to happen. So think of it like when you think about the difference in your glial cells and your neurons. Let's say your favorite movie star is Tom Cruise. So if Tom Cruise puts out a movie, he's the star of the show. He's the one that gets the big money. He's the one that draws the people to the theater. He's the attraction. He's the star. That's your neuron. It does the work. Your glial cells, that's the supporting cast. So this is the guy at the gas station. This is the woman in the restaurant. This is Tom Cruise's best friend or his butler or whomever. You got to have them to make the movie because they support the star. That's the role of the glial cells. More of this to come later on.